I smiled through the pain, another glass of expensive champagne pressed against my lips as I stood in the corner of my in-laws' immaculate garden. Thomas, my husband of 5 years, was in his element. Center of attention, surrounded by adoring family, his voice carrying across the manicured lawn as he regaled them with another story at my expense. And then she tells the client she can handle the entire account by herself. Thomas's voice boomed, followed by predictable laughter from his family circle. My little wife, who couldn't even manage our household budget last year, thinking she could run a multi-million-dollar advertising campaign. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. More laughter, more champagne, more invisible daggers piercing. My carefully composed smile. I had to step in, of course, Thomas continued, loosening his designer tie, the one I'd bought him for our anniversary. Told the client there'd been a misunderstanding. Can you imagine the disaster if I hadn't been there? His mother, Eleanor Blackwood, touched his arm affectionately. Thank goodness you were there to save the day, darling. Some people simply don't know their limitations. That last barb was aimed at me, of course. Eleanor never missed an opportunity to remind me that I wasn't good enough for her precious son, the brilliant marketing executive with the perfect pedigree. She glanced my way, that practiced smile of polite disdain perfectly in place. I took another sip of champagne, the bubbles bitter on my tongue. If only they knew that I'd been the one who secured that client in the first place. If only they knew that behind Thomas's flashy presentations were my strategic insights, my creative concepts, my meticulous planning. If only they knew who I really was. Darling, Thomas called out suddenly, come tell everyone about that disaster. Pitch meeting you had last month? All eyes turned to me, expectant, hungry for another amusing tale of my supposed incompetence. I straightened my shoulders and crossed the lawn, my Louboutins, purchased with my own secret funds, sinking slightly into the grass with each step. Which meeting was that, dear? I asked, my voice carrying just the right amount of confusion and self-deprecation. You know the one, Thomas said with that condescending smirk I'd grown to despise. When you thought you could handle the Meridian account by yourself. Ah, the Meridian account. My account. The one I'd researched extensively, built the entire strategy for, and then watched as Thomas presented my work as his own after reviewing my files the night before. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Oh, that one. I laughed lightly, playing my part. What a mess I made of that. She went in thinking she could impress them with some basic social media strategy, Thomas explained to his rapt audience. Didn't even prepare a proper media budget breakdown. The lie stung, but I maintained my smile. I had prepared an extensive budget breakdown, one that Thomas had conveniently forgotten to bring to the meeting. Thank goodness Thomas was able to save the day, his sister Margaret chimed in. She worked at the same agency as Thomas, another Blackwood occupying a position far above her qualifications. The client was so impressed with his quick thinking. Well, I'm still learning, I offered, playing into their narrative. Thomas is such a wonderful mentor, the perfect supporting wife, the grateful student, the harmless, hapless woman who needed guidance from the brilliant Blackwood family. If they could see inside my mind at that moment, they'd be terrified. Always happy to help, sweetheart, Thomas said, wrapping an arm around my waist and squeezing a little too tight. That's what husbands are for. His father, Richard Blackwood, the aging CEO of Blackwood Media Group, nodded approvingly. That's my boy. Always looking out for those who need it. Those who need it. As if I were a charity case. As if I hadn't been the one who'd conceived the award-winning campaign that had saved their biggest client last year, a campaign credited entirely to Thomas. Victoria's just not cut out for the corporate world, Eleanor said, her voice a perfect blend of sympathy and dismissal. But that's all right, dear. Not everyone is meant for high-pressure careers. There's no shame in being a supportive wife. I felt Thomas's arm tighten around me, a silent warning to play along. We'd had this conversation before. Just let them think what they want, he'd told me. It makes things easier for everyone. Easier for him, he meant. Easier to take credit for my work. Easier to maintain the Blackwood family mythology of inherent superiority. You're right, Eleanor, I said, my voice honey-sweet. Some of us just have different talents. Mine included patience and planning and the ability to play a very, very long game. Victoria was considering taking some cooking classes, weren't you, darling? Thomas said, giving me another squeeze. Much more her speed. I'd never mentioned cooking classes. I'd mentioned wanting to attend a digital marketing conference in New York, as an independent consultant, not under the Blackwood banner. Thomas had laughed at the idea. That sounds lovely, I replied, maintaining my mask. You know how much I enjoy learning new things. The conversation shifted then, as it always did, to the glory of Blackwood Media Group. Richard began pontificating about their latest acquisition, a struggling boutique agency that specialized in luxury brands. Got it for a song, he boasted, swirling his whiskey. The owner had no idea what he was sitting on. Those luxury clients alone are worth twice what we paid. Strategic incompetence, Thomas's brother Henry added with a smirk. He handled the legal side of the family business. The best kind to exploit? The irony of his statement nearly made me laugh out loud. The Blackwoods were masters of strategic incompetence themselves, maintaining their positions through connections, rather than skill, claiming credit for others' work, and somehow failing upward at every opportunity. The transition team starts Monday, Richard continued. We'll clean house, keep the clients, and fold them into our luxury division. Any decent talent worth keeping? Thomas asked. Richard shrugged. Doubtful. Small shops like that usually can't attract real quality, but we'll evaluate them before we let them go. I thought about all those people, about to have their professional lives upended by the Blackwood machine. How many would lose their jobs by the end of next week? How many would have their ideas stolen, then be discarded? Speaking of evaluations, Thomas said, turning to me with that public smile that never reached his eyes. Victoria just had her performance review last week. Didn't you, honey? This was new. We'd never discussed any performance review. I maintained my pleasant expression, waiting to see where this cruel game was heading. Oh? Eleanor perked up, always eager for news of my inadequacies. Yes, her supervisor had some concerns about her attention to detail, Thomas continued, fabricating freely. Said she might be better suited for an administrative role rather than client-facing work. The casual cruelty of it washed over me. I hadn't had a performance review because I didn't work for Thomas's agency. I was a freelance consultant with my own clients, a fact the Blackwoods conveniently forgot because it didn't fit their narrative, of me as Thomas's helpless, professionally challenged wife. Administrative work can be very rewarding, Margaret offered with fake kindness. Less pressure, more structured. Might be just what you need, Victoria. I took another sip of champagne, using the moment to compose myself. That's something to consider, I said mildly. You know, Richard interjected, we could always find a place for you at headquarters, Victoria. Something simple, answering phones, filing, might build your confidence. The conversation continued around me, my professional demotion, from a position I didn't even hold, decided by committee. I nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals, the perfect picture of docile acceptance. Inside, I was calculating 11 months. That's how much longer I needed. 11 months until everything would be in place. 11 months until the mask could finally come off. I appreciate the thought, I said, but I wouldn't want special treatment just because I'm a Blackwood by marriage. Admirable. Richard nodded, missing my point entirely. But family takes care of family. It's the Blackwood way. Yes, the Blackwood way. Take care of their own. Stomp on everyone else. Claim credit, deflect blame. Connections over competence, always. I think Victoria would be happier focusing on homemaking anyway, Eleanor added. A woman's touch makes such a difference in a house. I was just telling Thomas that your dinner party last month was adequate, but could have used more attention to detail. The table settings were rather basic. Mother has such an eye for these things, Thomas agreed. Maybe she could give you some lessons, Victoria. I smiled, thinking of the dinner party Eleanor was critiquing, the one where I'd handled every detail while simultaneously finalizing a major proposal for a new client. My own client, under my consultancy that the Blackwoods knew nothing about. Love that, I lied smoothly. The party continued its predictable pattern. More drinks, more stories at my expense, more Blackwood self-congratulation. I played my part flawlessly, the slightly dim but decorative wife, knowing that each moment brought me closer to the day when none of this would matter. Later that night, as we drove home in silence, Thomas finally spoke. You were quiet tonight. Was I? I kept my eyes on the road ahead. Mother thought you seemed distant. Unappreciative. Of course she did. I'm sorry to hear that. I was just tired. Thomas sighed dramatically. This is important, Victoria. These family connections are everything in our business. You need to make more of an effort. Our business. As if I were part of Blackwood Media Group? As if I were included in anything beyond being a convenient target for mockery. You're right, I conceded, the path of least resistance. I'll do better next time. He seemed satisfied with that, turning, his attention to his phone, probably responding to late-night messages from his latest assistant. I suspected they were sleeping together, but found I didn't care. It might even prove useful eventually. When we arrived home, to the sleek modern house that Thomas believed his salary paid for, I went through the motions of the evening routine. Shoes neatly placed in the closet, dress hung up, makeup removed, the perfect corporate wife preparing for another day of invisibility. Thomas was already in bed scrolling through his phone when I emerged from the bathroom. By the way, he said, without looking up, I'll need your help with the Waterman proposal this weekend. There are some market research numbers that need organizing. Translation. He needed me to do the work he'd take credit for on Monday. Of course, I replied, slipping between the sheets and turning away from him. Happy to help. As Thomas's breathing deepened into sleep beside me, I allowed myself to drop the mask for just a moment. I thought about the secure laptop hidden in my home office, tucked behind a false panel in my desk drawer. I thought about the shell company I'd established 3 years ago, the one that had been systematically acquiring small blocks of stock in key companies. I thought about the network of industry professionals who knew me by a different name, who respected my work and had no idea I was connected to the Blackwoods. I thought about Meridian Holdings, the parent company that owned Blackwood Media Group, and how they had no idea that their recent anonymous investor now owned 17% of their company. I thought about the evidence I'd been gathering, documenting every instance of the Blackwoods' unethical business practices, client theft, and financial improprieties. I thought about the 11 months I still needed to wait to ensure everything was perfectly in place. By this time next year, I wouldn't be standing in a corner at a Blackwood family party smiling through their mockery. By this time next year, there wouldn't be any Blackwood family parties at all. I fell asleep with that comforting thought, my dreams filled with the sweet anticipation of what was to come. Morning arrived with annoying precision. Thomas was already up, the sounds of his shower providing background noise as I checked my secure phone, the one Thomas knew nothing about. 3 messages waited, all confirming important developments in my long-term plan. The first was from Maya Chen, my most trusted ally, and the brilliant financial strategist who helped manage my growing investment portfolio. Meridian stock purchase. Complete. 17.8% ownership secured. Board documentation prepared. The second was from Darius Wilson, the investigative specialist I'd hired to document the Blackwoods' business practices. New evidence obtained. Richard's meeting with stellar clients recorded. Clear ethics violations. Added to secure file. The Sturio. Third was from Elise Stewart, the former Blackwood employee who'd been fired after Thomas stole her work, and then claimed she'd been incompetent. 10 more ex-employees confirmed for statements. Documentation of stolen work provided. Legal team reviewing. I quickly responded to each message, then deleted the conversation threads. By the time Thomas emerged from the bathroom, I was scrolling through innocuous social media on my regular phone, the perfect picture of a bored housewife with nothing important on her mind. "I'm heading into the office for a few hours," Thomas announced, adjusting his cufflinks. Another gift from me. "The Waterman files are on my desk. I need that research compiled by tonight." On a Saturday? I kept my tone light, slightly disappointed, but not challenging. "Success doesn't take weekends off, Victoria," he replied with that condescending smile. "Dad always says the difference between the Blackwoods and everyone else is that we're willing to put in the extra hours." The difference between the Blackwoods and everyone else, I thought, was that the Blackwoods were willing to steal other people's work while claiming they were putting in extra hours. "I'll take care of it," I promised, already planning how I would use the quiet hours while he was gone. After Thomas left, I moved quickly. I retrieved my secure laptop and began reviewing the latest reports from my team. The acquisition of Meridian Holdings stock was proceeding exactly as planned. Another 3% would give me effective control, especially once I revealed the evidence of the Blackwoods' systematic fraud and ethical violations. I pulled up the file on the boutique agency Blackwood Media Group was acquiring, Lux Creative Partners. Their founder, Gabriel Martinez, had built an impressive client roster in the luxury sector, but a recent divorce and health issues had left him vulnerable to the Blackwoods' predatory tactics. According to my intelligence, Richard had deliberately tanked several of Lux's projects through back-channel communications, driving down their value before swooping in with a lowball offer. Classic Blackwood strategy. Identify a target, undermine them, then acquire them for pennies on the dollar and discard the original talent. What the Blackwoods didn't know was that I'd already been in contact with Gabriel, that I'd already documented how Richard had sabotaged his agency, that we had a plan in place that would turn the tables dramatically once everything was in position. I spent the next several hours dividing my time between handling Thomas's Waterman research, which I could practically do in my sleep, and advancing my own agenda. By late afternoon, I had completed both tasks and carefully separated the two worlds again, storing my secure laptop back in its hiding place and arranging Thomas's research materials neatly on his home office desk. When he returned home that evening, slightly tipsy from what had clearly been more than just a few hours at the office, I had dinner waiting. The perfect corporate wife, supporting her hardworking husband. "This looks good," he acknowledged, surveying the meal I'd prepared. "Did you finish that research?" "It's on your desk," I replied, pouring him the glass of wine he expected. I cross-referenced the demographic data with the spending patterns, like you asked. Thomas nodded absently, already scrolling through his phone again. "Mom called. She wants us at brunch tomorrow. The whole family will be there to celebrate Dad's new acquisition. Another Blackwood gathering. Another opportunity to be the family punching bag." "Sounds lovely," I lied. "What time?" 11. "And Victoria?" His tone made me look up. "Try to be more present this time, more appreciative. It matters to the family." I nodded obediently, the perfect dutiful wife, even as I thought about what was waiting in my secured files. The recordings of Richard's illegal business practices. The documentation of Thomas stealing credit from subordinates. The evidence of Henry's creative accounting that bordered on fraud. "I'll do my best," I promised, and I meant it. Though not in the way Thomas assumed. Sunday brunch at the Blackwood estate was a study in old money pretension. Eleanor had arranged everything with her usual obsessive attention to status signals: the right china, the right flowers, the right background music playing at precisely the right volume. The perfect setting for another round of family self-congratulation. Arrived on Thomas's arm, dressed in a conservative floral dress that Eleanor would find appropriately feminine while slightly outdated. Exactly the impression I wanted to convey. "Victoria, darling," Eleanor greeted me with air kisses that never came close to my cheeks. "That dress is persistent. I admire how you keep things for so long. I'd purchased the dress last week, specifically for this occasion." "Thank you. Eleanor, I believe in making things last." She missed my double meaning entirely, already turning to greet her precious son with genuine warmth. The brunch proceeded as expected, Richard holding court, detailing his brilliant acquisition strategy to appreciative family members. Thomas and his siblings competing for their father's approval with stories of their own business exploits, most of which involved taking credit for other people's work. "Victoria," Richard addressed me directly as the servers cleared the main course. "Thomas tells me you've been helping him with some research projects." I nodded, adopting a pleased-to-be-noticed expression. "Just some basic data compilation, nothing complex." Good," Richard nodded. "Always useful to have a support staff at home as well as the office. Support staff. Not partner, not equal. Staff. Victoria knows her strengths," Thomas added with that public smile. "Detail work, organization, the behind-the-scenes stuff that makes me look good." The table laughed appreciatively, while I smiled and nodded as if I found it amusing too. "Speaking of making us look good," Richard segued, "the transition team goes into Lux Creative tomorrow. We'll be evaluating their staff this week, but I don't expect to keep many of them. Standard procedure, we'll extract the client information, harvest any useful creative concepts, and then restructure." "You mean fire everyone," Margaret clarified with a smirk. Richard shrugged. "It's business. Their company failed. We're just picking up the pieces." "Failed after you deliberately sabotaged them," I thought. "Do you think any of the creative team is worth keeping?" Thomas asked. "I could use some fresh blood in my department." "Doubtful," Richard dismissed the idea. "But review their portfolios if you want. Just don't get attached. We're not running a charity." I thought about Gabriel Martinez and his team at Lux Creative, the talented designers and strategists who were about to be chewed up by the Blackwood machine. Who would have their work stolen? Their careers derailed, their reputations tarnished if they dared to complain. Just like so many others before them. Just like me, in the fiction the Blackwoods had created about who I was and what I was capable of. "Actually," I heard myself saying, "I've heard Lux Creative has quite a strong design team." The table fell silent, all eyes turning to me in surprise. I rarely offered opinions during these family discussions. "Oh?" Richard's tone was dismissive. "And where did you hear that?" I backtracked slightly, maintaining my cover. "Just industry blogs I read sometimes. They've won some awards for their luxury branding work." Thomas laughed, patting my hand condescendingly. "Victoria follows some design Instagram accounts. Thinks she's an expert now." The table chuckled, crisis averted. I was safely back in my box as the slightly dim but harmless wife with cute little interests beyond her comprehension. "Awards don't always translate to business success," Richard pronounced definitively. "If they were any good, they wouldn't have failed." I nodded agreeably, as if enlightened by his wisdom, while mentally adding his statement to the file I kept of Blackwood hypocrisy. The Blackwoods themselves regularly bought awards and accolades to maintain their industry standing, a fact I had extensively documented. The conversation moved on, but I noted the calculating look Eleanor gave me. A momentary crack in my carefully constructed facade had caught her attention. I would need to be more careful. As the brunch concluded and family members dispersed throughout the house, Eleanor cornered me in the solarium, her smile sharp as cut crystal. "Victoria, dear," she began, her voice dripping with false concern. "I couldn't help but notice you seem different lately. Is everything all right?" I arranged my features into a look of mild surprise. "Different? How so?" "Little comments. That faraway look in your eyes. Almost as if—" She paused dramatically. "You're not quite as invested in Thomas's success as you should be." The warning was clear. In Eleanor's world, my only purpose was to support and amplify her son. Any hint of independent thought was a threat. "I'm sorry if I've given that impression," I replied, adding just the right note of alarm to my voice. "I've just been tired lately. You know how I get overwhelmed sometimes." Eleanor's expression softened, satisfied to have my submission reconfirmed. "Of course, dear. It's a lot to keep up with such a brilliant family. Perhaps you should see your doctor. Maybe some medication for anxiety might help you cope better." "That's thoughtful advice," I managed to say without revealing my contempt. "I'll consider it." "Do." She patted my arm. "We need you at your best, supporting Thomas. That's the most important contribution you can make." As she walked away, I maintained my placid expression, but inside, I was adding another entry to the long ledger of insults and dismissals I'd endured. The day of reckoning was coming, 11 months from now. But as I rejoined Thomas for our departure, a new thought struck me. 11 months was my original timeline, carefully calculated for maximum impact. But plans could be accelerated. As Thomas drove us home, complaining about his brother getting more attention from Richard, I gazed out the window and began to recalculate. Perhaps I didn't need 11 more months after all. Monday morning arrived with a sense of possibility I hadn't anticipated. As Thomas rushed to prepare for the Lux Creative transition meetings, I made the necessary wife noises, "Good luck today," and "Let me know how it goes," while my mind calculated new timelines and opportunities. "Don't wait up," Thomas instructed, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "First day of transitions are always late ones. Dad wants all the client data secured before anyone has second thoughts." "Of course," I replied, handing him his briefcase. "I'll leave dinner in the fridge." The moment his car disappeared down the driveway, I moved to my office and retrieved my secure phone. 3 calls later, my accelerated plan was in motion. "Maya," I said when my financial strategist answered, "I want to initiate Protocol Avalanche." A pause on the line. "That's 2 months ahead of schedule. Are you certain?" "Yes. The Blackwoods are moving on Lux Creative today. I want to be in position before they complete that transition." "Understood. I'll begin the additional stock acquisitions immediately. We'll need to move quickly to avoid triggering reporting requirements. Use the offshore entities we established. And Maya, it's time to contact Elise and the others, all of them." After ending the call, I reached out to Gabriel Martinez, founder of Lux Creative and the Blackwoods' latest victim. "They're coming today," I told him without preamble. "My security pass has already been deactivated," Gabriel confirmed, his voice tight with controlled anger. 5 years building that agency, and they locked me out with a text message. "Did you secure the files we discussed?" "Yes. Everything's been backed up to your secure server. Client contacts, campaign strategies, all the documentation of how Richard Blackwood deliberately tanked our Bellamy Hotel pitch." He paused. "Are you sure about this? The Blackwoods are notorious for destroying people who cross them." "Let me worry about the Blackwoods," I replied. "Just be ready when I call. The transition period starts today, but the real changes begin next week." My next call was to Darius Wilson, my investigative specialist. "I need the Blackwood files prepared. For distribution," I instructed. "All of them. The client theft documentation, the accounting irregularities, the harassment claims, everything." "That's ahead of schedule," Darius noted, mirroring Maya's concern. "Plans change. How quickly can you have it ready?" Give me 48 hours to organize everything properly. This needs to be airtight if we're moving early. You have 36 hours, I countered. I'll need it by Wednesday morning. After completing my calls, I turned to my secure laptop and accessed the financial tracker Maya had established. My ownership stake in Meridian Holdings stood at 17.8%, considerable, but not yet controlling. The accelerated purchasing plan would push that to 23% by the end of the week, which, combined with the support I'd cultivated from other disillusioned shareholders, would give me effective control of 36%, more than enough to initiate the changes I had planned. I spent the rest of the day finalizing preparations, pausing only to prepare the dinner I'd promised to leave for Thomas. By the time I heard his key in the lock that night, well past midnight, everything was in place for phase 1 of my accelerated timeline. How was it? I asked sleepily from the couch, where I'd positioned myself with a book as if I'd dozed off, waiting for him. Thomas seemed surprised to find me there. You didn't need to wait up. I wanted to hear about your day, I replied, the perfect, supportive wife. He loosened his tie with a satisfied smirk. It went exactly as Dad planned. We're extracting all the client data, reviewing their creative, assets, and preparing termination packages for most of the staff. Most? I asked, injecting just the right note of casual interest. There's a junior designer who might be worth keeping, and their client director had some useful contacts. He shrugged. But the rest are out by Friday. Standard acquisition protocol. Standard Blackwood protocol, I thought. Strip the company for parts, discard the people, claim the clients as their own brilliant acquisitions. That Martinez guy, the founder, tried to make a scene, Thomas continued, helping himself to the whiskey I'd left out. Security had to escort him out. Pathetic, really. If he'd been any good at his job, we wouldn't have been able to acquire them so easily. I thought of Gabriel, the award-winning designer whose agency had been deliberately sabotaged by Richard Blackwood. The man who'd built Lux Creative from nothing, only to have it stolen through the Blackwoods' unethical tactics. Some people just don't understand business, I offered, knowing it was exactly what Thomas wanted to hear. Exactly, he nodded, pleased with my agreement. Dad always says there are predators and prey in this industry. The Blackwoods are predators. It's why we survive when others fail. I smiled, thinking how appropriate his analogy was. Predators indeed. But even apex predators could be brought down with the right strategy. Come to bed, I suggested, playing my role perfectly. You must be exhausted after such a successful day. The next morning, Thomas left early again for day 2 of the Lux Creative transition. The moment he was gone, I activated the next phase of my plan. Maya called at precisely 9 a.m. Stock purchases are proceeding through our offshore entities. We should hit 21% by end of day. Good. And the board documentation? Ready for distribution when you give the word. I've also prepared the press package as discussed. Have it on standby. Will likely move before week's end. My next call was to Elise Stewart, the former Blackwood employee who had coordinated my network of other ex-employees with grievances against the family. Everyone's ready, Elise confirmed. 23 former employees with documented evidence of idea theft, harassment, or wrongful termination. The legal team has prepared their statements. Excellent. Make sure they understand the timeline. Has accelerated. We'll need them ready to go public by Friday. They'll be ready, Elise assured me. Most of them have been waiting years for a chance at justice. I understood their patience all too well. I'd been planning this for 3 years, carefully constructing my strategy while enduring the Blackwoods' constant belittlement. Every mock, every dismissal, every humiliation had simply added fuel to my determination. The remainder of Tuesday passed in a flurry of preparations. By that evening, when Thomas returned home complaining about ungrateful Lux employees making the transition difficult, my ownership stake in Meridian Holdings had reached 21.3%. On Wednesday morning, Darius delivered as promised. The complete Blackwood files are ready for distribution, he confirmed. All evidence has been verified, all testimonies corroborated. Send me the executive summary, I instructed. The document that appeared in my secure inbox minutes later detailed 5 years of Blackwood media, group malfeasance, 17 documented instances of stealing creative work from employees and claiming it as their own, 23 cases of client poaching through unethical tactics, 18 financial irregularities that bordered on fraud, 31 incidents of workplace harassment or discrimination, all meticulously documented, all irrefutable. I forwarded the summary to my legal team with a simple instruction: prepare for Friday. When Thomas called that afternoon, I could hear the stress in his voice. Something weird is happening with Dad's company stock. It's fluctuating like crazy. I made an appropriately concerned wife noise. Is everything okay? Probably just market volatility, he dismissed, though uncertainty lingered in his tone. But I'll be late again tonight. Dad's called an emergency executive meeting. I'll be here when you get home, I promised, already knowing exactly why Meridian Holdings stock was fluctuating. By Wednesday evening, my stake had reached 22.7%, and rumors of a possible hostile takeover were beginning to circulate in financial circles. The Blackwoods, predictably, were scrambling to identify the threat. Thomas didn't return until after midnight, his face tight with tension. Bad day? I asked innocently. Some investment group is trying to acquire Meridian, he snapped. Dad's furious. The board is getting nervous. Is there anything you can do? He ran a hand through his hair, a rare display of genuine distress. Dad's trying to identify the buyers, but they're working through offshore entities. It's all very calculated. Calculated. Indeed. 3 years of careful planning, accelerated into one intense week. I'm sure your father will handle it, I soothed. The Blackwoods always come out on top, right? Right, Thomas agreed, though with less conviction than usual. Dad always has a plan. So did I. Thursday arrived with a sense of mounting anticipation. My ownership stake clicked up to 23.5% by mid-morning, and Maya confirmed that our allied shareholders were prepared to support our move. The board meeting is set for tomorrow at 10 a.m., she reported. We have commitments from enough members to ensure the vote goes our way. And the legal team is ready? Waiting for your signal. The SEC notifications have been prepared as well, for immediate filing once we cross the 25% threshold. Everything was falling into place with a precision that felt almost poetic. Thomas called twice that day, each time sounding more frantic than the last. By evening, when he finally returned home, he was a bundle of barely contained panic. Someone's making a play for the whole company, he announced the moment he walked in. Dad's called in every favor he has, but no one seems to know who's behind it. I arranged my features into a mask of wifely concern. That sounds serious. What can I do to help? Thomas laughed bitterly. Unless you've got a few $100 million lying around to buy back our company stock, not much. If only he knew. I meant more along the lines of moral support, I clarified gently. Would you like a drink? He nodded distractedly, already pulling out his phone to check the latest updates. Dad's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. The whole family is expected to attend to show solidarity. Including spouses? I asked, my heart rate quickening slightly. This was an unexpected opportunity. No, just Blackwoods by blood or position. You know how Dad is about keeping business in the family. I did know. It was one of many Blackwood policies I planned to change very, very soon. I understand, I replied, handing him his whiskey. I'll be here when you get home tomorrow, hopefully with good news. Thomas took a long swallow of his drink. Dad will fix this. He always does. No one outmaneuvers Richard Blackwood. I simply smiled and nodded, playing my supportive role one final night. Friday dawned bright and clear. A perfect day for the culmination of 3 years planning. Thomas left early for pre-meeting strategy sessions with his father, his confidence seemingly restored after a night's sleep. Dad's identified some of the buying entities, he informed me as he rushed out the door. He's already working on countermeasures. By this afternoon, this whole takeover attempt will be history. Good luck, I called after him, before closing the door and reaching for my secure phone. It's time, I told Maya. Initiate the final purchases and alert the legal team. I'll meet you at the Meridian building at 9:45. Next, I called Darius. Release the documentation to the board members' personal emails. Timing is critical. I want it to hit their inboxes at 9:50, 10 minutes before the meeting starts. Finally, I contacted Elise. Alert the team. When the news breaks, they should be ready for media inquiries. With those calls complete, I moved to my closet and removed the false back panel, revealing the outfit I'd selected for today's events. A perfectly tailored Armani suit in deep charcoal, accessorized with subtle but unmistakable symbols of power. Not the soft feminine clothes Thomas was accustomed to seeing me in, but the wardrobe of a CEO about to take control of her company. As I dressed, I reviewed the morning's financial updates. My ownership stake had reached 24.8%, and the final purchases would push it past 25% just before the board meeting began. Combined with my allied shareholders, I would control 37.3% of Meridian Holdings, more than enough to force the changes I had planned. At precisely 9:15, I left the house where I had played the role of submissive wife for 5 long years and drove to Meridian Holdings' downtown headquarters. Maya was waiting in the lobby, tablet in hand, her expression professionally neutral despite the momentous events about to unfold. Final stock purchases are processing, she reported as we entered the private elevator that would take us to the executive floor. You'll cross the 25% threshold in approximately 12 minutes, with SEC filings submitted, automatically. And the board? All members are on premises. The Blackwoods arrived together 20 minutes ago and are in Richard's office, presumably planning their defense. I nodded, adjusting my cuffs as the elevator climbed. They don't yet know who they're defending against? No. The purchasing entities have maintained anonymity. They're expecting some corporate raider or competitor. They have no idea it's you. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor, revealing the tasteful opulence of Meridian Holdings headquarters. As we approached the boardroom, I could see staff members hurrying about with the anxious energy that accompanies corporate crises. We took our positions in a small conference room adjacent to the main boardroom, where we could monitor the situation until the perfect moment to make our entrance. At 9:50, Maya's tablet chimed softly. Documentation delivered to all board members. Stock purchases complete. You now own 25.2% of Meridian Holdings. I took a deep breath, centering myself for what was to come. Through the glass walls, I could see board members beginning to filter into the main boardroom, many checking their phones with expressions of shock as they discovered the documentation I'd sent. At 9:58, the Blackwoods made their entrance, Richard leading the way, followed by Thomas, Henry, and Margaret, all wearing nearly identical expressions of grim determination, ready to fight off what they believed was an external threat to their empire. If only they knew the threat had been living in their midst all along. It's time, I said to Maya, standing smoothly. We waited until Richard called the meeting to order at precisely 10 a.m., then made our entrance, walking confidently into the boardroom while all heads were turned toward the patriarch. The shock that rippled through the room when board members recognized me was palpable. Thomas's jaw actually dropped, his expression cycling rapidly from confusion to disbelief to the beginnings of horrified understanding. What is the meaning of this? Richard demanded, recovering first. Victoria, this is a closed board meeting. How did you get in here? I smiled, taking in the tableau of Blackwood consternation with quiet satisfaction. I'm here as a major shareholder, Richard. In fact, as of 9 minutes ago, I became the largest individual shareholder of Meridian Holdings, with over 25% ownership. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only when Thomas managed to stammer, That's impossible." "Not impossible," I corrected him gently, "merely improbable to someone who never bothered to see me as anything more than an incompetent trophy wife." Maya distributed folders to each board member as I continued. "Inside those folders, you'll find verification of my ownership stake, along with a summary of the evidence I've collected documenting the Blackwood family's systematic abuse of power, financial improprieties, and ethical violations." Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is preposterous. Some kind of bizarre revenge fantasy. Victoria is my son's wife, not a business person. She knows nothing about running companies." I kept my expression pleasantly neutral. "Actually, Richard, before I married your son, I ran a highly successful marketing consultancy under my maiden name. A fact none of you bothered to discover because you were too busy assuming I was exactly what you wanted to see, a decorative, inconsequential woman who could be safely mocked and dismissed." The board members were frantically flipping through the documents Maya had provided, their expressions growing increasingly grave as they absorbed the evidence against the Blackwoods. "You can't do this," Henry interjected, his legal mind grasping, the implications faster than his siblings. "The family has protective measures in place, all of which I've accounted for," I assured him. "Your protective measures work against external threats, not against someone who's had 5 years of inside access to your operations, your files, and your methods." Thomas was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. In a way, he was. "All this time, you were planning this?" "Not initially," I admitted. "Initially, I simply wanted to be a partner to you, Thomas, to have my ideas and abilities recognized. But after years of mockery, after watching you steal my work and claim it as your own, after enduring your family's constant belittlement," I shrugged elegantly. "Well, I decided to pursue other options." "This is absurd," Richard blustered, though with noticeably less conviction. "The board won't support this hostile action, regardless of what fabricated evidence you present." One of the older board members cleared his throat. "Actually, Richard, this evidence appears quite substantial and troubling." Another board member nodded. "The documentation of client poaching alone raises serious ethical concerns. Add in the financial irregularities and the harassment cases," added the sole female board member pointedly. Richard's expression darkened as he realized his usual intimidation tactics weren't working. "This is a temporary setback. When our legal team reviews these absurd claims, your legal team has already received copies," I interrupted smoothly, "as has the SEC, the Industry Ethics Board, and several key journalists. But this isn't about destroying Blackwood Media Group. It's about transforming it." I moved to the head of the table, the position Richard had occupied for decades. "I'm offering the board a clear choice. Vote to remove the current Blackwood leadership and restructure under my direction, or face a public reckoning that will likely result in criminal charges for some and the complete collapse of the companies." Stock value. The board members exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. They were business people first, and the calculation was simple: adapt to new leadership or go down with the Blackwoods. "You would do this to your own family?" Margaret asked, finally finding her voice. I met her gaze steadily. "You never treated me as family, Margaret. I was simply a convenient target for mockery, a supposed example of female incompetence that made you feel better about your own unearned position." Thomas pushed back from the table, his face ashen. "I need to speak to my wife, alone." "Ex-wife. Soon enough," I corrected him. "And we have nothing to discuss that can't be said here. The divorce papers were filed this morning, along with documentation of your affairs with successive assistants." He flinched visibly. "You knew about that?" "I knew everything, Thomas. I simply waited for the right moment to act. That moment is now. Richard slammed his hand on the table. This is outrageous. I built this company from nothing. The Blackwood name means something in this industry. Yes, it does, I agreed. It means theft of others' ideas. It means harassment and discrimination. It means unethical business practices. I paused, letting my words sink in. But that can change, starting today. The board chairman cleared his throat. I think we should call for a vote on Ms. He hesitated, pointedly not using my married name. Chen, I supplied. Victoria Chen. My professional name before I became a Blackwood. On Ms. Chen's proposal, the chairman continued. Those in favor of restructuring the leadership of Blackwood Media Group under her direction, please raise your hands. One by one, hands went up around the table. Even with the Blackwoods voting against, the outcome was clear. I had won. This isn't over, Richard growled, pushing away from the table. Actually, Richard, it is, I replied calmly. Security is waiting outside to escort you and your family from the building. Your access has already been revoked. As if on cue, the boardroom door opened, revealing 2 security officers waiting patiently. You can't just throw us out, Henry protested. There are procedures, transitions, all accounted for, I assured him. The transition plan has been in development for quite some time. Everything will proceed smoothly. As the security officers stepped forward, Thomas finally looked directly at me, his expression a complex mix of anger, shock, and something that might have been dawning respect. All those times I thought you were just decorative, he said, quietly. You were actually the most dangerous person in the room. I smiled at him, genuinely for the first time in years. The most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone underestimates, Thomas. Remember that in your next position, assuming anyone will hire you after the details of your misconduct become public. With that parting comment, I turned my attention to the board while the Blackwoods were escorted from the room, from the building, and from their positions of power. Now, I addressed the remaining board members. Let's discuss the future of Blackwood Media Group, or should I say, Chen Creative Partners? The days following the boardroom coup unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. While the business world buzzed with the shocking takeover of Meridian Holdings by an unknown entity, and the even more shocking revelation that the mastermind was the previously invisible wife of Thomas Blackwood, I focused on stabilizing the company and implementing the first phase of my transformation plan. My first official act as CEO was to halt the Lux Creative dismantling. Cancel all termination proceedings, I instructed the transition team, who looked at me with equal parts confusion and fear. Everyone stays until I've personally reviewed their positions. But Mr. Blackwood's instructions, one brave soul, began. Mr. Blackwood no longer works here, I cut him off smoothly. I do. And I say the Lux Creative team stays intact for now. My second call was to Gabriel Martinez, who answered with the weary voice of a man who'd already accepted defeat. Victoria, he greeted me, having known my real identity for months as part of our contingency planning. I heard rumors of a Meridian Holdings takeover. Any truth to them? More than rumors, I confirmed. I'm calling as the new CEO of Meridian. And, by extension, Blackwood Media Group, though not for much longer under that name. His shocked silence gave way to a disbelieving laugh. You actually did it? You took over the entire company? I did. And now I'm reinstating you as creative, director of what will soon be Lux division of Chen Creative Partners. Interested? Another pause. Are you serious? Entirely. Report to the main Meridian building Monday morning. We have a company to rebuild. By Friday afternoon, word of my takeover had spread throughout the industry. My phone buzzed continuously, with messages from journalists seeking comments, industry colleagues expressing shock or congratulations, and former Blackwood employees hoping for justice. I handled none of them directly. letting Maya and our communications team manage the information flow according to our carefully crafted strategy. The official press release was deliberately understated. Meridian. Holdings announces leadership changes following board vote. Victoria Chen appointed as CEO, with immediate restructuring planned for subsidiary Blackwood Media Group. The reality, of course, was far more dramatic than that bland corporate language suggested. The Blackwoods had been effectively excised. From the company that bore their name, their security access revoked, their personal items from their offices boxed and delivered to their homes by courier. The media is calling it the silent coup, Maya reported during our late-day briefing. Industry blogs are going wild with speculation about how you acquired so much stock without anyone noticing. Let them speculate, I replied, reviewing the day's financial reports. Meridian's stock had fluctuated wildly but ended only slightly down, a miracle considering the leadership upheaval. The Blackwoods lawyer called, Maya continued. They're threatening litigation. As expected, forward all legal threats to our team. We're well prepared. I had indeed been preparing for this moment for years, anticipating every possible Blackwood countermove. Their legal options were limited, given the mountain of evidence I had against them. Any courtroom battle would only expose their misdeeds more publicly. What about the personal residence? Maya asked delicately. Thomas has been calling non-stop. I considered this. The house Thomas believed was our marital home was actually owned by one of my shell companies, a fact he'd never bothered to verify. Like so many aspects of our marriage, he'd made assumptions that suited his narrative. Change the security codes and have his remaining items packed and delivered to his mother's house, I decided. The divorce proceedings will handle formal asset division, but he needs to understand that his access to my property is terminated. As Friday evening descended, I found myself alone in the CEO office that had been Richard Blackwood's inner sanctum for decades. I'd already instructed facilities to remove his personal items, but the space still carried the weight of his presence. Dark woods, leather furniture, hunting trophies on the walls. It would all be changed soon. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Now. Thomas. I didn't respond. There was nothing to discuss. No explanations needed beyond what I'd already provided in the boardroom. Thomas had never truly seen me, had never bothered to look beneath the surface I presented. That failure of perception was his problem, not mine. Instead, I turned my attention to the personnel files Maya had compiled. There were hundreds of employees across Meridian Holdings and its subsidiaries, many loyal to the Blackwoods through family connections or long association. Identifying who could adapt to the new regime and who would need to be replaced was my immediate priority. I was deep in these assessments when security called. Ms. Chen, Thomas Blackwood is in the lobby, demanding to see you. He's becoming disruptive. I checked the security feed on my computer and saw Thomas, disheveled and clearly intoxicated, gesturing angrily at the security desk. A sad but predictable response. Have security escort him out, I instructed. If he resists, call the police. Yes, Ms. Chen. I watched impassively as two security officers approached Thomas. His face contorted with indignation as they spoke. To him, pointing toward the exit. For a moment, I thought he might physically resist, but self-preservation won out. He stormed from the building, pausing only to deliver what I assumed was a final verbal tirade at the security camera. Maya texted a moment later. Might want to see this, with a link to Eleanor Blackwood's social media page. The Blackwood matriarch had wasted no time crafting a narrative that cast me as the villain and her family as victims. Devastated to announce that our family has been targeted by a calculated betrayal from someone we welcomed and trusted. Victoria has orchestrated a hostile and underhanded attack on our company using information she gained as part of our family. This unconscionable breach of trust will be addressed through legal channels. The Blackwood name stands for integrity and excellence, values that will prevail against such treachery. I couldn't help but smile at Eleanor's predictable response. Her post was already filling with sympathetic comments from her social circle, none of whom had any idea of the reality behind the Blackwood integrity. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Elise Stewart. "The former employees are receiving settlement offers," she reported without preamble. "The Blackwood's lawyers are trying to buy their silence before they can testify about the misconduct. Tell them to reject all offers," I instructed. "Our legal team will ensure they receive proper compensation through official channels, plus the public acknowledgement they deserve." "Will do." Also, several current employees have reached out, offering information about ongoing projects the Blackwoods were mishandling. Seems there's a fair amount of internal support for the change in leadership. That was promising. While I expected resistance from Blackwood loyalists, I needed a core of employees willing to embrace the new direction. "Have them document everything and send it through secure channels," I instructed. "And Elise? Thank you. Your coordination of the former employees was instrumental in making this happen. After what the Blackwoods did to my career, helping take them down has been the most satisfying work of my life," she replied with audible satisfaction. By midnight, I had reviewed enough personnel files to develop a preliminary organizational chart for the restructured company. Several key positions would need new leadership immediately, while others could transition more gradually. I sent the chart to Maya with instructions to prepare announcement materials for Monday. As I finally left the building in the early hours of Saturday morning, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. 3 years of planning, of maintaining. My cover while building toward this moment had culminated in a transformation more complete than even I had initially envisioned. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. My security team reported several attempts by various Blackwoods to access company systems, all thwarted by the immediate credential revocations we'd implemented. Thomas tried calling repeatedly until I had his number blocked. Eleanor continued, her social media campaign escalating to thinly veiled character assassination. None of it mattered. The board was firmly behind my leadership, the evidence against the Blackwoods was irrefutable, and the company's future was now in my hands. Monday morning arrived with a sense of true beginning. I entered the Meridian building wearing another power suit from my hidden collection, nodding confidently to employees who regarded me with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and cautious respect. Maya met me at the elevator, tablet in hand as always. "The all-staff meeting is set for 10 a.m. in the main auditorium. Gabriel Martinez arrived early and is waiting in the conference room." "Perfect. And the Lux team?" "All present, as requested. They've been assembled in their original department configuration, though they're understandably nervous." "They won't be for long," I assured her as we stepped into my newly redecorated office. The dark wood and hunting trophies were gone, replaced, with modern, clean-lined furniture and actual art on the walls. Gabriel stood as I entered, extending his hand with a mixture of respect and lingering disbelief. "Victoria, or should I say, Ms. Chen?" "Victoria is fine," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Thank you for coming, Gabriel." "How could I not? You pulled off the corporate equivalent of a chess grandmaster's perfect game." He shook his head, in amazement. The Blackwoods never knew what hit them. "They underestimated the wrong woman," I said simply. "Now, let's discuss the future of Lux Creative within our new structure." For the next hour, Gabriel and I mapped out how his team would not only remain intact, but would become a centerpiece of the rebranded company's approach to luxury clients. His relief was palpable as he realized his creative vision would not only survive, but would be amplified. "I still can't believe you managed this," he said as our meeting concluded, "taking down the Blackwoods and salvaging my agency in one move." "The Blackwoods made it easy," I replied. They were so convinced of their own superiority that they never bothered to look closely at what was happening around them. At 10 more a.m. Sharp, I stood on the auditorium stage before the assembled employees of Meridian Holdings and all its subsidiaries, including the Blackwood Media Group staff and the recently acquired Lux Creative team. Hundreds of faces looked back at me, expressions ranging from hostile to hopeful. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady and confident. "For those who don't know me, I'm Victoria Chen, newly appointed CEO of Meridian Holdings. You've undoubtedly heard rumors about the changes in leadership that occurred Friday. Today, I want to address those directly and outline our path forward." I paused, surveying the audience. The Blackwood family is no longer associated with this company in any capacity. Their removal was not a hostile takeover in the traditional sense, but rather a necessary correction based on documented evidence of systematic misconduct, ethical violations, and abuses of power. A murmur ran through the crowd. I continued, "I understand this is shocking news for many of you. Change is always difficult, particularly when it comes suddenly. But I want to be clear. This company will continue operation with stability and purpose. No mass terminations are planned. No radical dismantling of departments will occur." The tension in the room noticeably decreased at this assurance. "However," I continued, "we will be implementing significant changes to our corporate culture, ethical standards, and operational approaches. Blackwood Media Group will be renamed Chen Creative Partners, effective immediately. The practice of stealing ideas from junior employees will end. The pattern of discrimination and harassment will cease. The unethical business tactics that became standard under previous leadership will be replaced with integrity and transparency." I outlined the immediate changes: new leadership in key positions, revised ethical guidelines, anonymous reporting channels for misconduct, and a comprehensive review of all current client relationships to ensure they were built on ethical foundations. "For those of you from Lux Creative," I addressed that specific group, "I want to assure you that your positions are secure. The planned dismantling of your agency has been canceled. Instead, you will form the core of our new luxury division, with Gabriel Martinez returning as creative director." The visible relief on those faces was immediate and profound. "I recognize that some of you may have loyalties to the Blackwood family that make these changes difficult to accept," I acknowledged. "For those individuals, we will offer generous separation packages should you choose to depart. But I encourage everyone to give this new direction a chance. What we're building here is an opportunity to do exceptional work without the toxic elements that have undermined this company's true potential for too long." The Q&A session that followed was predictably intense. I answered each question directly, neither sugarcoating the mistakes of the past nor promising unrealistic perfection for the future. By the time the meeting concluded, I could sense a cautious optimism taking hold among many staff members, though pockets of resistance remained evident. Back in my office, Maya delivered the first reports from department heads. Operations is transitioning smoothly. Finance is still in shock but functioning. Creative departments are mostly optimistic, especially after hearing that Gabriel is back. And the resistance? Concentrated in upper management, as expected. Richard's executive team and several department heads loyal to the Blackwoods. They're not openly defiant, but they're clearly waiting to see if this change sticks before committing. "Keep them under observation," I instructed. "Give them a chance to adapt, but prepare replacement plans if necessary." By midday, industry, news outlets were running comprehensive stories about the leadership change, most featuring variations of the same headline. "Invisible Wife Emerges as Corporate Mastermind, Blackwoods Ousted in Stunning Coup." The financial markets had steadied, with Meridian stock rebounding slightly as analysts began to assess my background and determine I was, in fact, highly qualified for the position I'd claimed. In the afternoon, I met with each department individually, addressing specific concerns and outlining expectations. The pattern was similar in each meeting. Initial wariness giving way to cautious engagement as I demonstrated clear knowledge of their operations and challenges. "You actually understand what we do," one creative director said with surprise after I discussed the specific technical challenges his team had been facing. I've been studying this company comprehensively for 3 years, I replied simply. There's very little about your department I don't know. As the day progressed, I received updates on the Blackwoods' activities. Richard had called an emergency family meeting at his estate. Thomas had been seen at his private club, drinking heavily and complaining loudly about betrayal. Eleanor had escalated her social media campaign, now explicitly calling me a manipulative gold digger who had seduced her way into the family to steal their company. None of it was surprising, and none of it mattered. The Blackwoods were yesterday's news. I was focused entirely on tomorrow. That focus was momentarily interrupted when security called again late in the day. Ms. Chen, Margaret Blackwood is requesting entry to the building. Unlike her brother, she's being civil about it. I considered this unexpected development. Of all the Blackwoods, Margaret had perhaps been the least openly hostile toward me, though she had certainly participated in the family's systematic belittlement. Send her up, I decided, but have security remain outside my office door. Minutes later, Margaret Blackwood stood before me, looking distinctly uncomfortable in my redecorated office. Gone was her usual confidence, replaced by an uncertainty I had never seen in her before. Victoria, she began awkwardly. Or I suppose it's Ms. Chen now. Either is fine, I replied neutrally. What can I do for you, Margaret? She shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to understand. This wasn't just about revenge, was it? You could have divorced Thomas and exposed his behavior without taking over the entire company. I regarded her thoughtfully. You're right. This wasn't just about revenge, though I won't pretend that wasn't a component. I gestured for her to sit. This was about justice, not just for me, but for everyone your family has stepped on over the years. The employees whose ideas were stolen. The companies like Lux Creative that were deliberately sabotaged and then acquired at unfair valuations. The women who were harassed and then discarded. Margaret winced visibly. I never thought of it that way. That was the problem with all of you, I observed. You never thought about the impact of your actions on others. You believed your family name entitled you to take what you wanted without consequences. She was silent for a long moment. I don't know what to do now, she finally admitted. The family is in chaos. Dad is talking about legal action, but his lawyers have advised against it given the evidence you have. Thomas is drinking constantly and blaming everyone but himself. Mother is, well, you've probably seen her social media. I have, I confirmed. Predictable, if somewhat desperate. Margaret looked down at her hands. My entire identity was built around being a Blackwood executive. Without that, I studied her carefully, assessing whether this vulnerability was genuine or another Blackwood manipulation tactic. What exactly are you here for, Margaret? Sympathy? Understanding? A job? Her head snapped up at the last word. A job? You'd consider that? After everything? I'm considering a great many things, I replied carefully, including how to best utilize the talent available to this company. You weren't without skills, Margaret. Your problem was that you never had to truly earn your position or prove your value. Hope flashed briefly across her face. Are you saying there might be a place for me here? I'm saying that I'm evaluating everyone based on merit and potential, not family connections. If you believe you have something genuine to contribute without the Blackwood entitlement, submit a formal application like anyone else. It will be considered fairly. She seemed genuinely shocked by this response. You would actually consider hiring me? After how we treated you? This isn't about personal feelings, I explained. It's about building the best possible company. If you can demonstrably add value, your application will be considered. But understand this, you would start in a position appropriate to your actual skills, not the inflated title you previously held. You would be subject to the same performance standards as everyone else. There would be no special treatment. Margaret sat in silence, absorbing this. Finally, she nodded slowly. I think I'd like to apply, to prove that I can actually contribute something meaningful. Then submit your application through proper channels, I instructed. And Margaret? If this is some kind of Blackwood scheme to infiltrate the new organization, know that I will discover it, and the consequences will be severe. She stood to leave, then hesitated. For what it's worth, I am sorry for how we treated you. I never really saw you until today. After she left, Maya entered with a questioning look. Was that Margaret Blackwood? It was, I confirmed. She may be submitting a job application. Maya's eyebrows shot up. You're not seriously considering hiring a Blackwood? I smiled slightly. I'm considering many things, including the poetic justice of having former Blackwoods working under my direction, earning their positions through actual merit rather than entitlement. That would be quite a reversal, Maya acknowledged. Indeed. And perhaps the most complete form of justice. Not just removing them from power, but requiring them to learn how to function in a world where their name no longer grants them automatic privilege. As the day finally wound to a close, I stood at my office window, gazing out at the city skyline. In just 3 business days, I had completely transformed the power structure of a major company, ended the Blackwood dynasty, and begun building something new from the remains of their empire. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thomas again, using yet another phone. This isn't over. The Blackwoods don't go down so easily. I simply blocked the number without responding. Thomas was wrong. It was over. The Blackwoods had already gone down. They just hadn't fully accepted it yet. And as for what came next, that would be the most satisfying part of all. 6 months passed. With remarkable swiftness. Chen Creative Partners, formerly Blackwood Media Group, had not only stabilized after the leadership change, but was thriving under my direction. The toxic culture that had permeated the organization under Blackwood, rule had gradually given way to something more collaborative, more innovative, and ultimately more profitable. First quarter results exceeded projections by 18%, Maya reported during our executive meeting. Client retention is at 94%, and we've added 12 major new accounts since the transition. Around the conference table, my leadership team, a carefully selected blend of promising internal talent and strategic external hires, nodded with satisfaction. The Prentice campaign launch was particularly successful, Gabriel Martinez added. His Luxe division had become our fastest-growing segment, with luxury clients flocking to our revitalized approach. Industry press is calling it revolutionary. Revolutionary, I repeated with a small smile. Interesting, considering it's almost identical to the concept Thomas rejected when I presented it to him 3 years ago. The team chuckled appreciatively. My history with the Blackwoods was no secret within the high company, though I rarely referenced it directly. The contrast between past and present spoke for itself. Speaking of the Blackwoods, Maya segued, checking her tablet, we have updates on their current situations. I nodded for her to continue. While I no longer concerned myself with the family that had once belittled me, I did maintain awareness of their activities as a matter of prudent business intelligence. Richard continues to be unsuccessful in his attempts to secure funding for a new venture. His reputation has been significantly damaged by the evidence we released. Most potential investors are keeping their distance. This was unsurprising. Richard Blackwood's business practices had relied heavily on his position of power and family connections. Without those advantages, his true capabilities were proving inadequate. Henry has taken a position with a small law firm in Connecticut, Maya continued. Apparently, the major firms weren't interested once the details of his creative accounting practices became known. I nodded, unsurprised again. Henry's legal career had been built on nepotism rather than skill. Without the Blackwood name to shield him, his mediocrity was exposed. Thomas? I asked, though I already knew the broad outlines. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, with Thomas fighting unsuccessfully for assets he'd assumed were jointly owned. His attempts to paint himself as the victim had gained little traction outside Eleanor's social circle. Still unemployed? Maya reported. He's been rejected by 6 agencies in the past month alone. Apparently, word has spread about his habit of stealing others' work. He's been reduced to asking his mother for living expenses. That detail, Thomas dependent on Eleanor, carried a particular irony. He had often mocked me for what he perceived as financial dependence, never realizing that I had always been the one with genuine financial autonomy. And Eleanor continues her social campaign against you, Maya concluded, though her audience has diminished considerably. Her most recent charity gala had notably poor attendance. And Margaret? I asked, most interested in this update. Maya's expression shifted to something more complex. She's completed the first phase of the management training program. Her supervisor reports that she's working diligently, demonstrating surprising adaptability. The entitlement attitude has largely disappeared. This was the most intriguing development of all. Margaret Blackwood, once a senior executive by birthright alone, was now working her way through our management training program, starting at an entry-level position appropriate to her actual skills. To everyone's surprise, including perhaps her own, she was excelling. "Schedule time for me to check in with her," I instructed. "I'd like to evaluate her progress personally." After the meeting concluded, I reviewed the architectural plans for our headquarters renovation. The building that had once been a monument to Blackwood ego was being transformed into a more open, collaborative space, physically embodying the cultural changes we'd implemented. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Chen, your 2:00 is here." "Send them in," I replied, standing to greet what was perhaps my most unexpected visitor of the day. The door opened to admit Eleanor Blackwood. 6 months had aged her visibly. The perfectly maintained facade of the family matriarch had cracked, revealing the insecurities beneath. Her designer outfit, while still expensive, seemed to hang on her frame as if she'd lost weight rapidly. "Victoria," she greeted me stiffly, refusing my offered handshake. "Eleanor," I replied evenly. "Please sit." She perched on the edge of the chair like someone prepared for quick flight. "I assume you know why I'm here?" "Actually, I don't. Your appointment request mentioned only a personal matter." Eleanor's mouth tightened. "It's about Margaret. I want you to stop whatever you're doing to her." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not doing anything to Margaret. She applied for a position, demonstrated sufficient potential to be accepted into our training program, and is currently working her way through that program on her own merits. You've turned her against her family," Eleanor accused. "She barely speaks to us anymore. She missed Richard's birthday dinner because of some project deadline." "Margaret is an adult making her own choices," I pointed out. "If she's prioritizing professional responsibilities over family events, that's her decision." "This is about revenge," Eleanor insisted, her composure slipping further. "You're using my daughter to punish us." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "Is it really so inconceivable to you that Margaret might actually want to earn something on her own merits? That she might find satisfaction in achievements that don't come from family connections?" Eleanor's expression suggested this was indeed inconceivable to her. "The Blackwoods have built our success on family loyalty for generations." "No," I corrected her gently. "The Blackwoods built your success on family entitlement. There's a significant difference." She bristled. "We earned everything we achieved. Did you?" I challenged. "Or did you simply take credit for what others achieved while protecting each other from consequences?" I leaned forward slightly. "Eleanor, I didn't seek Margaret out. She came to me, asking for an opportunity to prove herself. I gave her that opportunity, the same opportunity available to any qualified applicant. She's being wasted in some entry-level position, Eleanor protested. She was an executive. She held an executive title she hadn't earned, I corrected. Now she's building actual skills and earning genuine respect. From what I've observed, she's happier than she's been in years. Eleanor's hands tightened on her handbag. And I suppose you think this is some kind of poetic justice. I think it's growth, I replied simply. Margaret is discovering who she can be when she's valued for her actual contributions rather than her last name. That's not punishment. It's opportunity. A complex array of emotions crossed Eleanor's face: anger, confusion, and perhaps a glimmer of unwilling recognition. There's another option, I continued. If you believe Margaret is being mistreated here, convince her to leave. She's not under contract. She can walk away any time. Eleanor's expression suggested she'd already tried this approach unsuccessfully. Our company culture values merit, innovation, and ethical behavior, I explained. If Margaret is finding fulfillment in that environment, perhaps the question isn't why she's chosen to stay, but why your family never provided her similar opportunities for genuine achievement. Eleanor stood abruptly. I can see this conversation is pointless. You've clearly manipulated the situation to your advantage. Actually, came a voice from the doorway. She hasn't manipulated anything. We both turned to see Margaret standing there, her expression resolute. I asked reception to notify me if you came here, she explained to her mother. I had a feeling you might try something like this. Eleanor's shock was evident. Margaret, you can't possibly be happy in this situation, working entry-level at your age for your sister-in-law of all people. Ex-sister-in-law, Margaret corrected. And yes, I am happy. For the first time, I'm doing work that's actually valued for its quality, not because of who my father is. This is ridiculous, Eleanor scoffed. You're a Blackwood. I'm also a person, Margaret replied quietly. With skills and ideas that were never taken seriously because everything was always handed to me. Do you know what that does to someone, Mother? To never know if you're actually good at anything because you've never had to truly earn recognition? Eleanor's expression suggested this concept had never occurred to her. Victoria didn't force me into this position, Margaret continued. She gave me an opportunity most people in my situation wouldn't have received. After the way our family treated her, she had every reason to reject my application outright. I remained silent, allowing this mother-daughter reckoning to unfold without interference. The training program has been challenging, Margaret admitted. I've failed some assignments. I've had to learn skills I should have developed years ago, but each accomplishment is genuinely mine. Her voice strengthened. Do you have any idea how that feels, Mother? To achieve something and know with absolute certainty that you earned it? Eleanor seemed temporarily speechless, a condition I had never witnessed in her before. I'm not coming back to the Blackwood fold, Margaret stated firmly. There's nothing for me there except hollow titles and the constant knowledge that none of it was truly earned. Eleanor gathered herself visibly. I see you've made your choice. Your father will be devastated. Dad is devastated that his schemes failed, Margaret corrected. He's devastated that his name no longer opens doors. He's devastated that actions finally had consequences. That's not the same thing. With a final disapproving look at both of us, Eleanor left, her exit lacking the dramatic impact she'd clearly intended. After a moment of silence, Margaret turned to me. I apologize for the interruption. No apology needed, I assured her. That confrontation was probably inevitable. Margaret nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's strange. 6 months ago, I would have done anything to maintain my family's approval. Now I find I value my supervisor's feedback on my market analysis far more than my mother's opinion of my life choices. Growth can be uncomfortable, I observed, but ultimately rewarding. I should get back to work, Margaret said suddenly, self-conscious. I have a project due tomorrow. Actually, I said, consulting my calendar. I was planning to check in on your progress this week. Do you have time now? For the next hour, Margaret presented her current work, a comprehensive analysis of market opportunities in emerging luxury markets. The quality was impressive, showing genuine talent that had previously been obscured by entitlement and lack of effort. This is excellent work, I told her honestly. Your supervisor's positive assessments are well-founded. Margaret's pleasure at this evaluation was evident and unfeigned. Thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from you. After she left, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected turns life could take. If anyone had told me a year ago that Margaret Blackwood would be working for me, and doing so with genuine commitment and growing skill, I would have dismissed the idea as absurd. Yet here we were. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Thomas. Spotted in the lobby. Security on alert. Instructions? I considered this. Thomas had made several attempts to confront me over the past 6 months, each one increasingly desperate as his professional and financial situations deteriorated. His most recent attempt had resulted in him being escorted from the building by security. If he's calm, have security bring him up, I decided. If he's agitated or appears intoxicated, ask him to leave. 15 minutes later, my door opened to admit Thomas Blackwood, escorted by a security officer who remained discreetly by the entrance. Thomas looked markedly different from the confident, borderline arrogant man who had once been my husband. His designer clothing had been replaced by off-the-rack items. His previously perfect grooming had given way to a slightly disheveled appearance. Most notably, the entitled confidence that had once defined his demeanor was gone, replaced by a wary uncertainty. "Victoria," he greeted me, his voice lacking its former assurance. "Thomas," I replied neutrally. "What can I do for you?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I've been trying to reach you." "And I've been quite busy running a company," I pointed out. "What is it you need?" He seemed thrown by my directness. The Thomas I had been married to expected social niceties and deference, neither of which I was inclined to provide anymore. "I need a job," he finally said, the words clearly difficult for him to utter. I raised an eyebrow. "A job?" "Yes." He straightened slightly, attempting to reclaim some dignity. "Despite what you might think, I am actually talented at marketing. I have years of experience and taking credit for other people's work," I finished for him. "Including mine," he flushed. "That's not entirely fair." "It's entirely accurate," I countered. "Your career was built on claiming others' ideas as your own, supported by your family name. Neither of those advantages is available to you now." "So this is revenge," he concluded bitterly. "You won't even consider my application." "I didn't say that," I corrected him. "I'll consider any application that comes through proper channels and is evaluated on its actual merits. What I won't do is create a position for you based on our former relationship." Hope flickered across his face. "You'd actually consider hiring me?" "I'd consider hiring anyone with demonstrable skills that would benefit this company," I replied carefully. "Your sister is currently in our management training program, working from an entry-level position appropriate to her actual abilities. If you're truly interested in employment here, you'd start at a similar level." The shock on his face was almost comical. "Entry level? I was a vice president." "You held a VP title," I clarified. "Just as I appear to have been just a wife, while actually building the strategy that ultimately allowed me to acquire your family's company. Appearances can be deceiving." He stared at me for a long moment. "You really think I have no value beyond my family name?" "I think you've never had the opportunity to find out," I replied honestly. "Everything was handed to you based on being a Blackwood. Now you have the chance to discover what Thomas without the Blackwood advantage can actually accomplish. By starting at the bottom," he said flatly. By starting at a position aligned with your demonstrable skills, I corrected. The same opportunity Margaret has embraced, apparently with considerable success. He absorbed this, his expression conflicted. Margaret is actually happy here? She seems to be finding genuine satisfaction in earning recognition rather than having it automatically granted, I confirmed. It's been remarkable to witness her transformation. Thomas fell silent, clearly struggling with this new reality. Finally, he asked, "What would the application process involve?" I outlined our standard hiring procedures, emphasizing that he would receive no special treatment, positive or negative, based on our history or his family name. It would mean working under people who used to be your subordinates, I warned. Him. People who know exactly how you operated before. That would require significant humility. I don't have many options left, he admitted with surprising candor. No agency will touch me with the reputation I now have. Dad's attempts to start a new company have failed. Mom's social connections aren't translating into job opportunities. Then perhaps it's time to build something new, I suggested. Something based on actual merit rather than entitlement. He nodded slowly, the reality of his situation finally seeming to sink in. I'll think about it. Do, I replied simply. The application portal is on our website. After Thomas left, escorted by the patiently waiting security officer, I turned back to my work with a sense of completion I hadn't anticipated. The cycle that had begun with humiliation at a Blackwood family party had come full circle, transforming not just my life, but the lives of the very people who had once mocked me. 3 weeks later, I reviewed the new application that had appeared in our system. Thomas Blackwood, applying for an associate position in market research, a role several levels below his former executive status. His cover letter contained something I had never expected to see. An acknowledgement of past failures and a commitment to earning his position through genuine effort rather than family connections. Whether this transformation was sincere or born of desperation remained to be seen, but the application itself represented a seismic shift in the Blackwood family dynamics. With Margaret already proving herself in our training program and Thomas potentially following the same path, a new type of justice was taking shape. Not the simple revenge I had initially envisioned, but something more complete and ultimately more satisfying. I thought back to that Blackwood family party a year ago, where I had stood in the corner nursing my champagne while Thomas and his family mocked my supposed incompetence. The memory no longer carried any sting. Instead, it seemed like a scene from another lifetime, a prelude to the complete reversal that had transformed all our lives. Maya, I called through the intercom, please schedule interviews for our newest market research associate applicant. The standard process, no special treatment. Thomas Blackwood? She confirmed with audible surprise. Yes, I replied. Let's see if he's genuinely ready to earn his place, just like everyone else. As I turned back to my work, I reflected on how the company had flourished once freed from the toxic Blackwood influence. Creativity was up, employee satisfaction had reached record levels, and our financial performance exceeded all projections. The empire the Blackwoods had built through entitlement and exploitation was transforming into something stronger, more innovative, and more ethical under my leadership. And now, in the ultimate reversal, the Blackwoods themselves were seeking places within it, not as entitled rulers, but as employees who would need to prove their worth through actual merit. I smiled as I reviewed the latest campaign proposals from Gabriel's team. Success, as they say, is the best revenge, but having your former in-laws working for you after they spent years mocking your capabilities, that might be even better. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.